Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, Raheem Sterling. He's turned it all around. He's the nation's darling after scoring a hat-trick in England's 5-0 victory over the Czech Republic. The Women's Super League, it's got a new title sponsor. Will £10 million be enough to help grow the sport? And the former England winger, Adam Johnson, he's been released from prison. Should the game give him a second chance? Here to discuss all the big issues, Martin Samuel is Chief Sports Writer at the Daily Mail. Jonathan Liu is Chief Sports Writer at The Independent, and Steve Bates is Chief Football Writer at The People. Morning, guys. Good to see you. Yep. Don't forget to tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a look at the papers then. Dominated by England's performance on Friday night against Czech Republic. Harry Maguire on the back of the Mirror. We must cherish Raheem Sterling. Magnificent performance by Sterling. Raheem's the daddy. This is the Observer's take on his performance. This is Jadon Sancho, Borussia Dortmund winger, talking about Raheem Sterling in the Observer this morning. They are the new sensations. Gareth Southgate warning some of the stars who did miss out on Friday night's performance that they face a fight to get back into this England team. One of them, Jesse Lingard, played a few minutes as a substitute in Manchester United's FA Cup defeat against Wolves, missed out or pulled out of the England squad. Southgate's got a warning for him and others. The chase is on. Manchester United want Callum Hudson-Odoi, came on Friday night against the Czech Republic. The Chelsea star is wanted by Manchester United. The front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning. Ben Rumsey with this story. He says, revealed the alarming cocaine use at Wembley Stadium on Friday night. So I did wonder why Ben was in the cubicles for such a long period of time. Now we know he was checking out what was going on, the amount of cocaine being used in the Wembley toilets. Wait for it, Southgate telling Hudson-Odoi he's got to stay at Chelsea. Other papers saying he should go to Manchester United. Steve's story this morning, it's on the back of the Express. United make Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sweat. Sunday People, Steve's paper that he's been working at for, what, 25 years now, Steve, is it? More? 30?
Feb 87.
Feb 87, there you go. 32 years, boy and man, a United man. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer still waiting to hear whether he's got the United job. And what's it like to play the worst team in international football? Well, San Marino will find out a little bit later on because, of course,
there we go.
Boom. Boys are listening, they're on the ball.
Hey.
They are on the ball. England were on the ball on Friday night, Martin, and it's super impressive performance. And, of course, we all raved about the performance of Raheem Sterling and his hat-trick. So let's start there. We've got a lot of other issues that we'd like to discuss about England and their performance. But let's start with Raheem and the transformation from where he was to where he is now as a footballer.
Well, it's the best season. Probably the best season of his life for Manchester City and also for England. If you think even in the summer, when there were fan polls about England performances and stuff, Raheem Sterling was always at the bottom, always, and sometimes at the bottom of the 22 players on the field. You know, you'd play Tunisia and he would rate lower than any Tunisian player, and it was unfair. He was playing better than that. He wasn't playing as he is now, but he was playing better than people gave him credit for. And what has happened is that Southgate has shown great faith in him. Pep Guardiola never lost faith in him. Pep Guardiola called him during tournaments, I think in 2016, called him and spoke to him and tried to boost his confidence. And that's now being replayed. The faith that those two managers in particular have shown in Raheem Sterling is now being paid back because he's an exceptional player and he has been right from his very first season at Liverpool. And it takes time with England. It does take time. There's a lot of pressure around England. There's a lot of expectation around England. If you're the guy that is going to be taking people on, that could be one-on-one with a goalkeeper, all of these things, it's difficult. It's difficult, and it takes time to mature. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing performances of a mature England international.
Yeah. Can you think of another player where perhaps has got off to a very troubled and difficult start to his international career, John, who's come through in the same way as Raheem Sterling?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real transformation. I think
there is a real it's a real kind of step from being a Premier League player to being, you know, an established international. The style of football is different. The pace of football is very different. And you know, I suppose you look at guys like Joe Cole, who ripped up the Premier League, was a wonder kid at West Ham, and found the step to international football a lot different, and maybe took 20 or 30 caps before he looked comfortable. Sterling's slightly different in that he had achieved things at domestic level, you know, before he really achieved them at an international level. And I think what the last sort of 6-12 months in England have shown is the value of putting faith and confidence in a player who has frankly had to undergo quite severe and you know, really quite disgraceful flack at times. It really puts into perspective how well he's done in the last couple of years, when against everything that he's had to put up with from the media, from fans, that he's managed to maintain this improvement year on year. You know, he's becoming decisive in games. He's getting into the 6-yard box more. His finishing has improved. And I think off the pitch as well, the amount of leadership he's shown. You see guys like Sancho and Hudson-Odoi looking up to him. There's a future England captain in there, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. He's shown that he has all the qualities required to be a figurehead for England for years to come.
John mentioned the criticism of Raheem, and the media undoubtedly played a part in that, but so did England supporters. Think back to Euro 2016 and the campaign to bring Raheem Sterling home from that tournament. At what point, Steve, does criticism and the word that John used, flack, cross the line? At what point is it OTT?
Well, clearly some of the negativity around him in terms of stories that have been, you know, a steady stream of closely analysing everything he does, more off the pitch than on it, you know, with his own wealth, which he can do what he wants with. Some of it has been, you know, out of order. It's really nobody's business what he chooses to do with his wealth. I think a justifiable criticism of Sterling has been on the pitch, where he's not turned what is great potential into something more tangible in terms of goal scoring. But he has this season. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Pep Guardiola last season was kind of frustrated by him in that he wasn't really converting the number of chances he was getting. And I think he was told that was an area he needed to sharpen up on. He has done this season. His hat-trick goal on Friday night was his 24th of this season in 44 games. Now, that's better than a goal every other game average. That's undeniably good for a player who's not an out-and-out striker. He's scoring goals for City, important goals for City now. Don't forget also for England, he scored 2 goals in Spain when we won 3-2 in the Nations League in October. So he is beginning now to score for England, because he went through that spell, didn't he, where I think he didn't score in almost 3 years for England. And that obviously precipitated a lot of the criticism against him, that he was a player that, and even in Russia, you know, as Martin alluded to before, during the tournament in Russia, there were consistent calls for him to be taken out of the team. But Gareth Southgate brilliantly stuck with him, could see that he was offering more to the team than just an attacking threat. And I think we're seeing the rewards of the perseverance by Guardiola and Southgate.
On that point about Russia, Steve, you are entitled as a reporter, if you don't think Raheem Sterling's playing well in Russia, you are entitled to write a piece saying you think, I don't know, Danny Welbeck, for example, should be playing. That's just
no, and it wasn't just one reporter; it was fans as well. You know, I don't think he was delivering as much in terms of goals, and I think the frustration was that you can see goals in Raheem Sterling. His pace to get into positions, like there probably were strikers.
His movement's really good.
The strikers to get that first goal the other night against the Czechs, there would have been a few strikers that wouldn't have got there. But he got there, stretched, got there. His pace got it
as well. It was a tap in, but it was a tap in that you had to stretch for.
He got there, and I think it's knitting all these things together. And Jonathan's mentioned, you know, potential future captain in there if he continues to be a leader off the pitch as well as on it. I'm not sure whether, for me, he would be a leader on the pitch. He seems kind of a quiet guy, but you know. he's going to develop and mature,
Southgate's calling him, yeah, when Southgate's talking about him as a role model, then, as you say, if Southgate's talking in those terms, his increased maturity, his standing and stature in the game, then...
Well, certainly for the young black players that are coming up in the team now, your Jadon Sancho, your Callum Hudson-Odoi, they will need role models who maybe have faced difficulties, overcome hurdles that they may be faced with in the future. And they can see the way he's handled it. And not only that, handled it in a really mature and kind of out there way, you know, coming out a few weeks ago to say that he felt the media portrayal of himself and other black players was out of order.
I mean, just on the pitch, there has been a real growth there, and I think one of the interesting developments since the World Cup has been his partnership with Kane. In that Kane is, for whatever reason, finding it quite hard to score from open play for England because he's being heavily marked. He's dropping deeper to receive the ball, and so Kane, as you saw for that first goal, is as much of a creator now for England as he is, a goal threat, and that's possibly creating spaces and opportunities for Sterling, and that might be why we're seeing such a goal return from him.
Yeah, it's been an outstanding season for him, Martin. You've written about him in your column in terms of winning, the potential for him to go on to win Player of the Year.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah,
this is off the back of Raheem's. I guess it was Rio Ferdinand's comments that probably prompted you to write that piece. Is he the best footballer in England as things stand?
If you had to pick an English Footballer of the Year, if the Footballer of the Year had to be English, and there's no reason why it ever should be, but if the Footballer of the Year had to be English, it would be Raheem Sterling. The competition that he's got are from other players in the Premier League who are foreign players. So if you're saying, is he the best player in English player at the moment? Yes, he is. Is he the best player in the Premier League? You've got competition from Virgil van Dijk, certainly. You've got competition within his own club with Sergio Aguero this season that he is having. And the realisation, I think, from everybody now that Sergio Aguero is coming towards the end of his time in England, and you're looking at the individual awards that he's received and thinking, we might have shortchanged this guy. And sometimes you do get that thing where a guy's at the end of his career and he suddenly gets one, you know, when we might have had better seasons in the past, because it's, you know, considered to be an oversight. Sadio Mane, the way he's playing at the moment, you know, if his goals push Liverpool over the line to their first title of the Premier League era. So he's got competition for Footballer of the Year. But if you're talking who is the best English footballer at the moment, well, it's Raheem Sterling. Yeah,
he has had an outstanding season. We need to talk about a few other issues involving the England team. One of them is Declan Rice and his Instagram post, which surfaced on Thursday, John.
Yeah.
This goes back to his Republic of Ireland youth team days as a Republic of Ireland junior footballer. He's since apologised for the post, for the message, for the comment that he left on another Ireland teammate's Instagram page at the time. How did you feel about it? And how did you feel Declan Rice handled it and his what was clearly a well-orchestrated response?
Well, I thought he handled it as he needed to handle it. I mean, we've all done stupid things when we were 15, 16. I took a packet of hula hoops from a shop. I'm not proud of it, but you know, it's only when he's in the
confessions of a criminal.
This got away with it.
I got away with it actually. This is
John, this is the Sunday Something. It's not confessions of a junior criminal.
No, sorry, forgive me.
We're not going to go around the table here asking for similar confessions.
If the police in which area do you live?
It would have been northwest London.
Okay, if the police in northwest London are watching this, John lives at.
Yeah, forgive me, Father. They were delicious. Yeah, but it's only in the public eye when now he's an England footballer that this has suddenly surfaced in the week of his international debut. That's what I find slightly interesting. That the almost kind of the outrage machine, it needs kind of content to feed itself. And this entirely irrelevant post that he did on Instagram 4 or 5 years ago, which has no relevance to anything he does on a football pitch, his suitability to play for England. The fact that that's being dug up now, I find quite sinister, actually.
But it's dug up. Do you not think it's dug up by people who are embittered by the fact that he's
Yeah.
switched nationality. So they you know, this is the thing now. When the problem between Roberto Firmino and Mason Holgate, sorry,
Yep.
Holgate, Mason
Colgate's
Holgate.
the
Yeah,
toothpaste,
Colgate's
yeah.
the toothpaste. The Mason Holgate. The straight away, everyone's gone to his timeline and have found some completely tangential stuff that he said in which he used homophobic language when he was 15, and then suddenly the whole thing switched around and he looks like getting done by the FA, if you remember this from about a year or so ago. And so you've got this really unfortunate position for millennials, people of that generation, where your every mistake, every daft thing you've ever said. I mean, a guy saying up the bar 17 years after the Good Friday Agreement really is not showing the greatest handle on Irish politics or whatever. He's probably trying to impress somebody who was born in Dublin. If you look at the guy that he's tweeting, you know, if you listen to Declan Rice speak, he doesn't sound Irish. You listen, this guy, he's fundamentally Irish. He's probably overcompensating for the fact that he wasn't born in Ireland and using language that he thinks is all part of Irish, being Irish and nationalism and stuff. And then 3 or 4 years later, that comes back to haunt him. And I think it's got to be seen in that sort of context, basically, that, you know, you're allowed to be 16, you're allowed to be 17, you know, you're allowed to do daft stuff.
I think I'm more interested in the confessions around this table, actually, now, than Declan Rice. You got any, Steve?
Not on.
Why did you take those hula hoop? Were you just hungry?
Oh, leave the man alone.
Not on the hula.
But he
hoop
brought it
scale.
up.
Yeah.
Well, he did bring it up, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think it was. Obviously, I intended to pay for them, but I didn't have the right. I didn't have any money. Didn't have the right change, so I just left the shop.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of it.
No, I know. I've been...
Don't. I mean, like any kids watching, it's not right. It's not
Not
clever.
big and it's not.
I've been walking around for years with a Woolworths calculator in the same circumstances. This is more, I mean, in terms of monetary value,
Wait, sorry, with the what?
with a Woolworths calculator. Remember Woolworths?
Yeah.
I've been walking around with a Woolworths calculator for years, and I've always thought I should probably go. I would go and repay them, but they went bust.
Well, they went skin.
Yeah.
Probably because people
Possibly
kept nicking their
because- yeah,
calculators.
possibly
That's,
because there was
It's the only thing.
you know.
It's the only thing.
The head of Woolworths is sitting here looking at this now, thinking if we'd have got that £1.75, that would have made all the difference.
In his caravan.
Yeah.
You lured me into that, didn't you?
Anybody else?
You come on this show. You come on this show and
let her blame this
get people out of work probably for this. Steve?
No,
Come
mate,
on.
no.
Oh, come on.
No, listen, I've done daft things, but never involving pilfering. No.
No. Okay. Let's just finish off because on the England's performance on Friday night. So we've talked about Raheem. We've talked about Declan Rice. Came on to make his England debut. But were you genuinely electrified by the manner of it? What the performance?
All of it. Yeah.
Oh.
Not at the very beginning. I wasn't. No, I think it was
first 20 minutes.
it was a bit dull the first 20 minutes, if I'm being absolutely brutally truthful. But then it got better. But because of the youthfulness, the pace, the speed, the intent, the threat in the team now, you can forgive them those 20 minutes of banality, if you like, because you know at some point in a game they will explode. When you've got that kind of ability in the team and a kind of fearlessness, if you like, which is often a word mentioned when you associate these young England players with how they play, you're always the potential's always there for them to explode, and we saw that with. I thought the first goal was just brilliantly conceived, and it was done in a heartbeat. You know, Kane passed to Sancho, whipped in, goal. So simple, but the speed of it caught the Czechs out, and the speed of England's play will catch better teams in the Czech Republic out. That's why I'm genuinely excited going forward. That I think, you know, and I know, listen, we've been here so many times and it's coming home and etc. But I genuinely believe England do now have a platform from which to go on and win something. Because I think if they don't win, we always hark back to the golden generation, of course, of Gerrard, Scholes, Beckham, Lampard, Terry, Ferdinand, who didn't win anything, and that was a great disappointment. But I believe that the current crop are no longer burdened by that. Mm-hmm. I definitely believe they are. That particular kind of cross to bear has gone, and I think we proved that in Russia. And I think these lads can go on and win something.
OK, well, let's find out if they do in the Nations League final next summer in Portugal. And, of course, would eat well on their way to Euro 2020. OK, next up, while John gets through a packet of hula hoops in the break, Women's Super League. It's flush with cash, £10 million. What will they do with it? More on that coming next. Welcome back. Let's talk Women's Super League now. And the news this week that £10 million is going to be invested in the game. They've got a new title sponsor. John, where should the money be distributed? Where should it go to grow the women's game?
Well, it's great news for the women's game, first and foremost, because the rap on it for years and years from people who just want to tear it down is that it doesn't pay for itself. The fact that sponsors are now coming into the game and investing money can only be a good thing. It's only a start. That money, I think, is partly going to prize money. I think there's a new £500,000 prize for
the winners, yeah.
To the winners, which it's fairly small potatoes when something like West Brom is getting 90 million for getting relegated from the Premier League. But yeah, it's a start. If that money goes into grassroots facilities, into investment in training and academies, then that's when that's when you kind of start to see a multiplier effect. It's a start for the women's game, but it's only a start.
Yeah, it is a start, but it's a good start. A positive.
Yeah, and also with sponsors who have a track record in football, with obviously having sponsored the Premier League for many years. They know what they're doing, so there'll be brains and intelligence in there on how best to hopefully appropriate that money. I mean, obviously the bigger clubs probably seem to be self-sustainable in a way. The clubs attached to, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Everton, traditional women's teams, that they appear to be doing okay, even though attendances in gates aren't actually brilliant when you properly analyse them. But 10 million will certainly help, and there are some Women's Super League clubs who are struggling financially. I think I saw a story about Yeovil potentially going out of business because they haven't got any funds. So it would be nice to think that some of those funds could be diverted into the less high-profile teams who obviously are needed to bolster the leagues. It shouldn't just be about the big teams having clubs. I mean, obviously Manchester United recently started up again a new team, and you would guess that they would be reasonably well funded by the club.
You mentioned the attendances, Steve, actually, because I watched the League Cup final a few weeks ago. This was Arsenal against Manchester City at Bramall Lane. There's just over 2,000 people there. Why for the League Cup final, there are only 2,400? It was around that sort of figure.
Yeah.
Why aren't there more people? This is one of the prestige fixtures in the season. If we were to compare, and I don't think we should always compare with, this is what men's senior football is doing. This is what men are doing in international football. I don't think we should always compare it. But if you do, and you compare the League Cup final in English football, then you would see 80,000 people at Wembley.
Yeah, I mean, said that, I did also read that recently in Spain there were 60,000 at Atletico Madrid v Barcelona.
There was, yeah.
At the Wanda Metropolitan. So clearly an appetite for it there. But yeah, on a sort of ongoing basis, it does seem that there isn't the appetite to go to games. For whatever reason, I'm not quite sure. Got the Women's World Cup coming up. Maybe that will generate more interest. Certainly, it's the profile of women's football is rising, but it's really no good if people aren't going, because it won't sustain itself.
What this does, one of the things that this does, is that once you've got £10 million sponsorship money in there, it says to people, it shows people that this is a serious thing. You can't. The Atletico Madrid attendance is a 60,000 crowd, with 56% of the crowd getting in free, and it's still a very, very good crowd. Because 44% of the crowd paid between, I think it's about £4.5 and £8.5 quid. So it's still a very good crowd. But whilst you have to keep giving everything away for nothing, while you have to keep letting everyone in for nothing, it's not saying to people that you have got a product that is worth paying for, that you've got a product that's worth investing in. What this does is it changes it. is it changes that perception of women's football, that you've got to somehow let everyone in for nothing or charge everyone 50p or whatever. You say, look, there's £10 million here. This is serious. This is a serious product. It's a serious league. It's a serious sport, and I think that actually has the capability of drawing more people in than keep offering everyone free tickets all the time, because, you know, where do you actually go with that? Where do you actually go with just giving, you know, saying, oh, well, you might as well come in for nothing because, you know, we can't get anyone to come in and watch this. Whereas if you've got £10 million in sponsorship, right, now this is a proper league. This is a serious league, and it's these steps forward that I think that's why it's a game changer, because you'll get broadcast money in now. You'll get broadcast money in now, which is something else they've struggled with.
Yeah. It's interesting that I think Kelly Simmons, the FA, still thinks that women's football is about 6 or 7 years away from becoming profitable. That's the timescale. I mean, people forget that women's football was banned in this country between 1921 and 1971. It's decades and decades behind, well, men's football, but also a lot of other sports in terms of infrastructure and investment. That kind of thing doesn't get changed overnight. It's still a small sport. And, I mean, what this money does is, you know, in a way, it's kind of simple Keynesian economics. You invest in order to reap a reward several years down the line. It's got to be a long-term investment. And if a young, sort of, you know, 13, 14-year-old girls footballer looks at this and thinks, actually, you know what, there's a prospect of earning a living from this game, that's the long-term benefit, rather than, you know, where this money goes in the short term.
I mean, you would imagine that a lot of it will be driven by the Lionesses, you know, that they're playing, I think they're playing Canada at Manchester City's Academy Stadium shortly, and that's a sellout. Now, I don't know how many, you might know, Marty, how many that holds, 7,000, 8,000 something. So, yeah, so not huge, and for an international game with the Lionesses, like, very high profile these days, but, you know, I suppose it's.
But that would be more than a lot of men's senior international fixtures over this international break.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we see it when we watch Test cricket, don't we? We see the Oval, we see Lords, Old Trafford, Headingley sold out for Test matches. Yet you go to a county ground, these two men and his dog.
That's right.
So, you know, there are parallels in that. And I don't think we can immediately expect the women's game to suddenly be generating crowds of 20,000.
The men's game grew organically. That's the whole. The expectations of the women's game is that that everything becomes a project. Everything becomes an experiment. Or what we'll do is we'll take that team out of the Premier League and we'll put that team in and we'll do this and you think, well, just let it go, let it grow organically, and the teams that are finding they've got a natural support can get bigger, and the other teams will have to shrink. And if some of the teams that have to shrink have got these massive names attached to them, if nobody is going to watch Birmingham City Ladies or whatever, but there is a team elsewhere that is growing, well, then that is how men's football developed.
Right, but there's a limit to what the free market can do there. I mean, it needs the media to give it a platform.
But that's where this, if it leads to broadcast, you know, if it leads to that, if it leads to you see in the women's Premier League on whether it's on Sky or whether it's on terrestrial television, if it becomes more visible in that way. That's what I mean about the organic. Yeah. That's what I mean about the organic growth.
Women's football isn't going to grow like men's football because men's football didn't have to compete with men's football while it was growing.
But it can grow in its own way, if you see what I mean. I mean, it's not. You know, you're not going to suddenly get 80,000 people at Old Trafford. No, I agree. But it can grow within its own.
And maybe it will.
Within its own framework.
It will have to have a completely different audience as well. Maybe we cannot simply expect that just because you go and watch Tottenham, Arsenal, Man United, City, Liverpool, that you're also going to go and watch ladies' football.
Well, Steve, I've been asked that very point in the past. But when you look at your schedule and itinerary and say, well, OK, if you cover the international team, Champions League football, Premier League football, FA Cup, Carabao Cup, I haven't got any more room in the diary to go and cover another sport, another discipline.
You're talking that from a journalistic
Yeah,
point of view?
you haven't got any more to... Where there isn't an 8th day of the week.
Yeah.
You've only got 7.
And you know, if as at some point we've mentioned, you know, it doesn't become free anymore, women's football, which it's largely not anyway. But you know, people have got to make a choice probably these days between, you know, huge prices in the Premier League going to watch your team. Well, you know, can you afford to go and watch women's football, even though it's not as expensive? And do you want to go and watch football, women's football? You know.
There is an audience out there. I mean, how much is a ticket to go and watch?
What I'm saying is, it's maybe not the audience who watch Premier League
It might be a
or
different
Championship.
audience, yeah, or it might be an audience that's being priced out of Premier League football or Champions League football. You know, if you pay £70 or £80 for a ticket at the Emirates, and you've got 2 kids, and you know, take the family to Boreham Wood and see, you know, you can watch Vivian Miedema and Jordan Nobbs, and you know, there's a different audience out there, I think, and that can actually bring fans into the game that maybe aren't watching men's football now.
Yeah, and it is a family sport. We can't deny that. We want it to be a family sport as well. The Telegraph this week appointed Anna Kessel. This is a pioneering move, isn't it, by the Telegraph, to bring her in to increase the coverage, the marketability of the sport. Will it work?
Well, I think it will, but again, in the longer term, there's been a lot of sort of derision in the shorter term. But the fact that the Telegraph, I mean, I worked at the Telegraph for 9 years, are making this investment, I think is proof that they think that this is a growth area, that people might not be prepared to pay for women's sport now, but in the future, if you get ahead of the curve, then there is a real prospect for growth there. If brands like Barclays are getting involved now, it's because they see a long-term future for the sport. So I think, you know, the Telegraph have identified women's sport as a real growth area. That and Brexit, I think, are its two sort of, you know, main growth areas at the moment.
Yeah, let's stick to women's football, because I suspect Brexit could go in all sorts of directions, particularly after yesterday. You know, not the march yesterday, were you talking?
I was actually, yeah.
Oh, we?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
It was nice. It was nice. Although, I mean, it was kind of very slow progress, and there were times when you weren't really sure whether you were getting anywhere at all, which in many ways is very much like Brexit itself.
Yeah. Sums it up.
Entirely fitting.
Yeah. Sums it up. Steve couldn't be there. Where were you yesterday?
I was working, filling your Sunday papers for
filling
you.
these newspapers, yeah. What about this commitment that the Telegraph have got, Martin? What are we looking forward to consume? Because in men's senior football, we're consuming Raheem Sterling scoring a hat-trick for England against the Czech Republic. Transfer stories left, right and centre. Will Ole Gunnar Solskjaer get the job at Manchester United? Will it be Pochettino? It's all of that packaged up in newspapers every single day. Women's football, is it a different type of story? Is it a different feel? Is the fabric very different?
Well, they're not household names like Raheem Sterling for starters, so you know, so it's completely different in that respect. The most important thing about the Telegraph initiative is that they're serious about it, because I worked at a newspaper where they decided they were going to rebrand the newspaper, the Express, around sport, and we were going to have a sports pull-out, and this was fantastic. And I went in there, and Rob Shepherd went in there, and David Walker went in there, and John Richards went in there, all went in there. And then they sold the paper, and the first thing that happened was that the new owner came in and went and brought in Rosie Boycott from the Independent. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that Rosie decided was that the sports pull-out was taking up all the features pages, and features were getting squeezed, and so stuff the sports pull-out, and that was gone. And then we're all sitting there thinking, right, so we've actually all left very, very good jobs to join the Daily Express. OK. So that's not helpful. You know, so with the Telegraph, it's got to be a commitment. It's got to be something whereby they don't look at the figures in a year's time, and if they haven't got a sales spike over it, go, oh, right, well, you know, we had a go at that. That didn't work. Right, what's our next thing to try and sell the newspaper? Because it is a newspaper after all, so it's looking to sell copies. So whilst I do think that it's a very good thing that they're doing, a really positive thing they're doing, you've got to be committed to it. You've got to be committed to it for more than just, let's see if we get a sales spike out of this, and if we don't, well, then we'll try something else. Yeah. You know, we'll invest it all in the racing coverage instead, and see if we can, you know, get the racing audience.
Yeah. Well, good luck to the Telegraph.
Yeah.
Big story, big interview with Daniel Carter on the front page of their sports section today, illustrating their commitment, an ongoing commitment to women's football. OK, next up, it's back to men's football. Adam Johnson, released from prison this week. Can he get a second chance in the sport? More on that coming next. Oh, the fun we have in the breaks.
Yeah.
It's a shame about the rest of the show, isn't it, Martin?
We're all over now.
Yeah. Reminder who's with us this morning. Martin Samuel, Jonathan Liu and Steve Bates. Let's remind you what's in the newspapers as well. Back of the Mirror, we must cherish Raheem. This is Harry Maguire's message to the country. Raheem Sterling's hat-trick, of course, for England against the Czech Republic on Friday night. Raheem's the daddy. This is some of the England players, Jadon Sancho, talking about his performance. The new sensations, South talking about his young school of England footballers. He's warning the no-shows. It's going to be tough to get back into this England squad. Jesse Lingard, one of them. That's on the front page of the Sunday Times this morning. Back in the Mail, Rob Draper's story. United chasing Callum Hudson-Odoi. That's on the back of the Mail on Sunday. Steve's story in the People this morning. That Ole Gunnar Solskjaer still yet to be confirmed as the Manchester United manager. Will they still go for Mauricio Pochettino? What's it like to play the worst? I've done this gag, haven't I? Scotland, of course, playing San Marino a little bit later on. Big game for Alex McLeish and his boys. Front page of the Observer. Ben Rumsey's story here. William Mackay, the agent involved in the Emiliano Sala deal. His threats to Cardiff City's executives. That's on the front of the Observer this morning. They've set a record for the amount of times they can say, as revealed. It's littered, virtually every single paragraph. It's one of the phrases that Paul McCarthy, my old sports editor at the News of the World, someone that you know very well, Martin, said if I ever used again, well, I won't say, I can't say it on there. What are the worst things in journalism that we always write? As revealed is definitely one of the crimes, isn't it?
Yeah, broke his leg.
Exclusive on every story.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Last night blasted.
Last night blasted.
So last night blasted.
Yeah.
Yeah, a furious tirade, furious row erupted.
Rant.
They're endless.
Yeah.
The use of the word amazing when it's not.
It's not. OK, let's move on to Adam Johnson. Former Middlesbrough player, former Manchester City player, former England player, released from prison this week for a sexual offence. Should the game give him a second chance?
I don't think it's about whether the game should give him a second chance. I can't see who's going to be brave enough to do that. Forget the rights or wrongs of whether he should get a second chance or not, or whether people believe because he's served half of a 6-year sentence, then he has served a punishment, and whether that should still be ongoing. That's for other people. But I cannot, for the life of me, see any club who would be brave enough to take him on. We saw this, didn't we, with Ched Evans, who was obviously playing for Fleetwood now, but subsequently appealed and had his conviction quashed, and he's now playing for Fleetwood. I don't cover Fleetwood matches, so I don't know when he plays what kind of a reaction he gets from other fans, but I would imagine that it would be pretty heavy kind of stick if directed at Adam Johnson if he ever took to a football field in this country again. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not saying, but I can't imagine there's a club out there who would want to risk that kind of a circus and that kind of a sideshow by taking Adam Johnson on.
Mm. What's his next move, John? How would the game accept him? What could he do?
Honestly, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less about Adam Johnson. I will get to the rights and wrongs of this. It's an incredible privilege to be a footballer. We can't pretend it's like being in any other profession. It's not like being a bricklayer or a hod carrier or working in a call centre. Football doesn't owe anybody a living. It's an incredibly privileged position. It's well rewarded. There's adulation. You get cheered by fans every week. You are that cliched phrase, a role model. The game doesn't. Adam Johnson forfeited that privilege when he groomed a 15-year-old girl, abused his position of trust, abused his position of power, and frankly, my concern and my solidarity is with the victim of his crime. And it sounds like, he's out of prison. He sounds like he needs help. I hope he gets it, but football doesn't know him a living. And I couldn't care less where he goes next.
Where he goes in terms of his life, career,
in terms of his life.
or whether he comes back into football.
I'd be extremely disappointed if a football club gave him a chance. He's entitled to get on with the rest of his life. I just sincerely hope it's not at a football club.
Martin, you wrote about it on Saturday morning, didn't you? Yeah. And it is a difficult subject.
No, what I wrote about was how society lives with people who have been convicted for offences that are outside what would be termed the bounds of normal or reasonable society. There's a play on at the National at the moment called Downstate by Bruce Norris, and it deals with exactly this sort of issue, that it's a society that believes in rehabilitation, reintegration, and yet there is a view of sex offenders, paedophiles, but that never distinguishes, that thinks that there is one path. Now, Adam Johnson, for instance, I'll give you an example. Adam Johnson is routinely referred to as a paedophile. He's not a paedophile. And now this is not to lessen what the man did at all, but he's not a paedophile. A paedophile is attracted to prepubescent forms. He is not a paedophile. He's a sex offender. But this is what I mean about the way that society looks at this subject. It doesn't matter about getting language right. Everyone's the same. He's a 31-year-old man. So I didn't say that Downstate hasn't got any answers to this, by the way. I mean, Bruce Norris hasn't got any answers. I haven't got any answers to this. But it is problematic, the way that society coexists with people who are released back into society but are deemed to be beyond society, if you see what I mean, beyond reasonable, normal society. It's problematic. So that's what I wrote about with Adam Johnson, that I can absolutely understand why no football club would touch him with a barge pole. I can absolutely understand the feelings of revulsion that are felt. Is that troubling if you're trying to square that off with rehabilitation and reintegration and all the things that we think the justice system should include? Yes, it's troubling. I'm not saying I've got the answer.
Why should football be or why should the question be asked, will football give this man a second chance?
Because that's what he does.
Yeah,
that's what he's notorious for on the field. That's what he does. That's his skill, isn't it? That's his art.
Yeah, it is. It's his job. But if you're a school teacher and you commit that offence, you will never be allowed to set foot in a school or be allowed contact with 15-year or 16-year or whatever it was again. So why should football be any different? Why should we feel uncomfortable that maybe, as Martin's just said, in a rehabilitation aspect, that we are not giving this guy the chance to make amends for what he's done?
Probably because
if he was a teacher, he'd never work in education again. So why should Adam Johnson ever work in football again? I'm just offering that as a point of view.
Yeah, but on your point of effectively second chances, which most people most people prescribe subscribe to that theory.
But
don't they,
nobody
give somebody another chance. But this is a very obvious anomaly to that sort of thinking.
Nobody says it's an outrage that education doesn't give teachers who've perpetrated similar offences a second chance. It's just considered immediately. That's just not happening.
Do you think anybody will?
Give him a chance? I'd be astonished, absolutely astonished if they did.
It'd be very difficult for any club, bearing in mind that what he did was he completely abused the trust that there is and the contract, for want of a better phrase, that there is between a professional sportsman and the people that follow him.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a social contract, isn't it,
used,
Martin,
yeah, it's a
effectively,
social contract. He used his position in society and in you know, at that football club. He utterly misused it. He utterly betrayed any sort of trust.
You'd ask yourself, what would a club get out of employing him?
Well,
What benefit would a club get from that, other than an absolute huge amount of criticism and disdain?
If he talked, would it make any difference? If Johnson talked? Because he said nothing. He said nothing so far. Okay,
Well, you read everything about it, and
Steve, but if he was to find a platform and a vehicle to explain his actions, would that make any difference to your thinking?
For allowing him back into football, no.
I don't think football has a duty. I don't think the media. I don't think anybody really has a duty to centre Adam Johnson at this stage.
Yeah.
I think once you commit an offence like that, you can't really expect. And as Martin's just explained there, you know, with the players talking about, that there is a social stigma attached to that kind of an offence, and you know, you have to understand that if you do that, then you can't expect any.
But it's just
sympathy.
the complication, the troubling aspect of it is he's a 31-year-old man, and that with any sort of offender, he's got the way average life expectancy is now, he's got another half a century or whatever, and it's how society then relates to somebody that has been released from prison all the world over. It's not as if they kept Adam Johnson in prison so that he can't interact with society. So right now he's out. So now there's another 50 years.
That is his second chance, though.
But that is his second chance. Yeah, I absolutely accept that, John. I absolutely accept that. And I absolutely accept what you say about you couldn't care less, because I look at it and think I couldn't care less as well. There's a little part of me that just finds it ever so slightly troubling in terms of how, once you've let someone back into society, how society is then to interact with these people when the sort of inclination of society is just to go, like, forget them all. Yeah. That's all.
Okay, Adam Johnson.
Bleeding heart liberal in me.
Adam Johnson released from prison this week for sexual offences. OK, next up, we're going to talk about this. Sam Wallace has written about it in his column this morning. It's Birmingham City, not the only idiots in the Championship chasing fool's gold. That's coming next. Welcome back. Let's talk Birmingham City now. Sam Wallace, regular, of course, on this programme, has been writing about it in his column this morning. Birmingham, not the only idiots to be chasing the fool's gold of life in the Premier League. Daniel Taylor, we were talking about football vernacular earlier. This is what's known in our trade as a drive-by. Harry Redknapp, he's playing a familiar tune to disown Birmingham's Blues. This is Harry Redknapp passing the buck, according to Daniel in his column this morning. The blame game has begun. About after their 9-point deduction in the Championship, Martin. Where does the blame lie? Is it, as Sam says in his column this morning, that everyone's chasing this pot of gold, the rainbow of life of playing in the Premier League?
Well, that much is true, because the worth of playing in the Premier League against the worth of playing in the Championship is so utterly disproportionate that everyone is desperate to get there. It always stops with the club. I mean, I take Danny's point about Harry Redknapp, but any degree of sympathy I had for Birmingham evaporated the minute they said, "Oh, Gianfranco Zola and Harry Redknapp, you know, did this and did that." Because if your firm says to you, "Go out and buy a car," you know, a company car, and you come back with a fleet of 10 Maseratis and skint the firm. If someone has signed off on the fleet of 10 Maseratis and not said to you, no, when we said buy a car, you know, there's a parameter that you can. Well, it's their fault that the company's gone skint, basically.
I wouldn't buy a Maserati.
No, I'm not saying you would, but you probably know more about cars than I do. I know nothing about cars, so I'm just picking a car that sounded fancy. Yeah. Is it any good? I don't know. Yeah, they're good.
They are
fancy, are they? Right, OK. But I don't hold with this thing where the club blames the manager and says that the manager spent too much money, because there is not a manager that can write a cheque. There's not a manager that can agree to wages. There's not a manager that can do the sign-on fee, pay the agent. There is always somebody above them, and the word is no. Now, whatever we may or may think about Daniel Levy or how much she should invest or whatever, the one club that never, ever complained about how much money Harry Redknapp spent is Tottenham. Because there's a fellow up the top that would turn round if Harry went in there and said, I need this or I need that, and would say, no. There you go. That's the word, no.
It's curious, though, how apart from Spurs, you look at Portsmouth, Southampton, QPR, now Birmingham. Sort of a few years after Harry's been in town, they seem to run into massive financial difficulties. It's like the Zelig of, he's always there, but it's never his fault.
Yeah, but all I would say with that is, if you look at those three clubs, they've got something in common as well, which is lousy owners. I mean, the Guidamax went into Portsmouth, spent a load of money, again, spent a load of money that, Harry Redknapp spent, but with no one ever saying, oh, you can't spend this, and someone else always runs it, and then decided they wanted their money back. Well, OK, that's, financial fair play came in part, in this country because of Portsmouth. But what should have happened at Portsmouth, what should always be in place is you cannot loan a club money if you're the owner. It's a gift. If it's a gift, then you can't ask for it back. And what happened was they asked for the money back at Portsmouth. But I totally take your point. But the three things that have got in common there: Trillion Trophy Asia. I think it was Rupert Lowe, wasn't it, at Southampton? I have to be careful. And the Guidamax at Portsmouth were certainly not my idea of very good club owners.
Let's face it, there's not a manager operating today who doesn't push his football club for signings.
David Dean says they always want one more player.
Of course they do. They do. It's the nature of the business, because managers see themselves as front of house. They're the ones that lose their jobs, get the stick. It's very rarely the owners in the background that are in the headlines. Obviously, Mike Ashley at Newcastle is probably an exception to that at the moment. But generally, it's the manager who's front of house who lives or falls on the players he has. And there is just not a manager, particularly in the Premier League, who's not pushing his board for the next 20 million player. And Harry's no different in that respect. I'm not defending Harry in any way, because he's always operated on the fact of going into a club and immediately turning things upside down and getting players in. And why wouldn't you? Because clearly he's in there because it's not worked before. And he's had some success doing that. But I wouldn't totally blame him. Listen, this is a Birmingham club, don't forget, that not long ago sacked Gary Rowett when they were doing really well. They were absolutely flying. Now, is that a great management decision? I wouldn't have thought so.
The guy you mentioned there, Mike Ashley, so when you don't spend money, by the way, everyone hates you. So Mike Ashley doesn't spend money, everyone hates him. Harry Redknapp does spend money, everyone, there was a little bit of Goldilocks in this.
Yeah.
This one's spending too much money, this one's not spending enough money. But that's Mike Ashley's point. Mike Ashley's point about investment in football is it's the only industry in the world. I met him at Watford once. I might have told this story, and he said, he was explaining things that he said it's the only industry in the world. He said if I took any other business that I have, he said, and I put £80 million into that business, I would receive some tangible advantage. There would be some uplift if I spent £80 million on marketing, or £80 million on... He said, in any other business, you spend £80 million, you get some return for it. He said, football's the only industry where you spend £80 million, you end up in a worse position than you were in the first place. He said, and then the fella that you gave the £80 million to says, you know what will solve this? You go, what? I need £80 million. And you go, but we had £80 million and we got worse. He said, so... It doesn't follow, football doesn't follow like any other business where, you know... So, as you say, every manager wants 80 million quid. Every manager, Martin O'Neill, when he was at Aston Villa, spent a lot of money to get Villa from nowhere to sixth. And then it was basically why Andy Lerner in the end backed off was because it was going to be the same amount of money again to get from sixth to fourth. And then if you want to try and win the league, it's the same amount of money again. And I know everyone says, oh, Leicester. Leicester's a one-off. Leicester's a one-off season. We probably won't see another Leicester in our lifetimes. Usually, in football, if you throw enough money at it, something happens. So
The Birmingham are just the symptom here.
Yeah.
The real issue is the fact that the Championship is kind of turned into a casino. And for every Wolves, you've got a Birmingham, Aston Villa, who may face sanctions of their own, Derby. Deloitte did last summer, they did an audit of all the Championship clubs' finances, and they found that the average wages to turnover was something like 100%. They were spending all of their turnover on wages, and obviously a lot more on top of that. I think at Birmingham, after that 2017 summer, it went up to 197%. That's not sustainable.
And if you compare, sorry to interrupt, if you compare that with Manchester United, the wages turnover is about 45%, isn't it, Steve? It's very low, yeah. Yeah,
they're generating the money. But for the teams trying to get into the Premier League and banking on the fact that you've got to do it in one or two seasons, this is the kind of thing that's going to keep happening.
But the scrutiny is good, right? Isn't it? Because we prioritise and we spend our lives talking about the action in the Premier League, let's face it. But this is Championship, this is the clubs knocking on the door, the casinos you talked about, John. But the scrutiny is good from the Football League.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, you can quibble about whether this arbitrary figure of £39 million, which they're allowed to lose, is fair. But I think the principle is, I know what Martin thinks of financial fair play.
Yeah.
What this proves is that sometimes clubs and owners need to be saved from themselves.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm not in favour of it, because throughout football, there's two ways that your club can fall down the league and someone else takes it. One is you get it wrong on the field, one is you get it wrong off the field. And I'm not saying clubs should go to the wall, because if you stop people giving loans, you've got to make it a gift. You cannot owe money to your owner. That would solve a lot of the problems. But I do think that there's a lot of rules in place to stop bad owners being bad owners. Well, you've got to learn the hard way.
For the proper persons.
Well, there's that. That's one of the other things I object to. Not object to as such, but I find wrong about the EFL is that they've got all these rules in place to punish you for spending money, which sort of to punish you for having ambition. But Bolton sail on towards oblivion or whatever, and the Football League don't do anything about Bolton or Charlton or Blackpool and stuff. And you think, well, hold on. If you can have rules in place, to guard against being too ambitious, then why are there no rules in place, against guys coming in and destroying football clubs? I mean, absolutely destroying. One thing about Trillion Trophy Asia, they've broken the Football League rules. They're not about to go skint because they've got a lot of money. They've got a lot of money, so they're not about to go skint. Whereas you look at some of these other clubs, they're about to go skint.
Yeah, but there is a desperation to get in the Premier League, though, isn't there? That's bordering on the manic now because of the money involved, and Leeds are down in the Championship because of overspending, overreaching in their Premier League days.
Bad ownership, though.
Yeah, of course it was, And again, the blame there was for David O'Leary for he got the blame, not Peter Ridsdale. Ridsdale was backing his manager, you could say, to sustain a Champions League kind of model that simply wasn't sustainable. If he had
a bet with money he didn't have, didn't he? Basically,
absolutely.
He got a nice fish tank out of it, though, didn't he? Some good stories about Leeds United back in the day. OK, next up we're going to talk about Gerard Gillet, the A-League referee who's coming to the Championship next season. A little bit of football innovation that's coming next here on a supplement. Welcome back. We love a bit of innovation. And we saw a bit this week in the Australian A-League. Jared Gillette, the referee who's coming to the Championship next season, wore a headset or microphones mic'd up in his final game. You can see on social media the results, which I thought were very impressive. I thought it was handled very well. We only saw a 4 or 5 minute clip of it, so we didn't get to see the entire 90 minutes, Steve. But in terms of the idea behind it, what were your feelings? I'm all for it, by the way.
You are?
I was a big fan of it. I thought it brought a new dimension into people. Okay, I know it was a short clip, but I thought it added to the drama of the game.
The one thing that struck me about the clip when I watched it, there was not one swear word on it.
That's why it was only a 4 minute clip, I think, because
So-
if it had the 95, it might have been a bit different.
I think you'd probably have trouble getting 4 minutes of non-swearing in the Premier League.
No. But there's not a swear word we don't know yet. Is there some new ones?
No, but I mean, if somebody's on the bleep button, trying to bleep it out, then I think in the Premier League, they're going to have a lot more of that. And
You hear swearing, it works in rugby, and you do hear swearing from the players in rugby. You don't hear swearing at the referee.
No.
You will hear the occasional expletive, in the background sort of thing that the microphone has picked up. So I think you've got to accept that there will be industrial language as long as you're not hearing someone abuse the referee, and it might cut that out.
I would pay to have Mike Dean mic'd up. I mean, that would be...
But he'd love it, yeah. He'd be first in the queue, wouldn't he, for that?
Absolutely unmissable TV, that, wouldn't it? Mike Dean mic'd up.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'd hear what he said to, or didn't say to Pochettino the other day at Burnley.
We know what Poch said to him.
We know what Poch said to him, but we don't quite know what triggered that when he walked away and then decided to come back again. But listen, is it a good idea? Yeah, probably. I mean, are the crowd going to hear exactly what's going on? They do in rugby, don't they?
You get a ref link.
Will it be up on a screen?
Which you buy. You buy this ref link, and it works. I think it works for the whole of the Six Nations, for all of your home games, so it would probably work for the season.
It's the World Cup as well.
Yeah,
you can buy a little headset.
Yeah, and then so you put that. If you want to listen to what the referee's saying, you buy the ref link and you put that in your ear, and away you go.
I suppose that you would get an appreciation of why perhaps a decision has been made, if they're willing to explain that. But the thing I find with referees, and which is why still after games referees, still don't explain their decisions. So are they going to explain those decisions on the pitch to people? I probably don't think they would.
I mean, maybe this is a slightly unpopular opinion, but I don't think there's a massive clamour out there to hear more from referees. I'm speaking personally. As a watcher of football,
No,
I'm not thinking like, you know what would be great? I'd love to hear what Craig Pawson's thinking right now. I thought the Aussie clip was interesting as a curio, as a one-off. But I mean, where does this lead? Do we get to celebrity refs? We get refs making wisecracks. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's could we stop this, strangle this at birth? Like, we're going to get celebrity refs making wisecracks. If you know you're mic'd up, you're instantly performing, much as we're doing now. And, this is a monster that must be stopped. You're going to get celebrity referees. They're going to be on I'm a Celebrity. They're going to be, you're going to get supercuts. They're going to be...
Then we can vote for them to sort of...
Vote for, and then
haven't we trialled this before?
David Ellery, I don't know if it was a trial, but David Ellery was mic'd up, wasn't he?
Yeah,
in the 88.
I'm sure he was.
89.
Back in the day.
And that was illuminating in itself, because it shone a light on something that you just, a world that you just didn't get access to. And
Cricket's county cricket is one days.
Captains mic'd up. You can now hear. Well, in 2020 you can hear from the captains, which is often quite.
Do you turn that? Is that where you turn it down?
No, I don't mind. I mean, the captains have, and the players and the fielders, they have insights into what's going on the pitch. Often it's quite banal because they're trying to catch a ball at the same time. So it's not always the most illuminating chat.
People shouting "catch it" when the ball's in the air.
People shouting "catch it," and like lots of banter. When just sort of Shane Warne or Damien Fleming's on the commentary, like, I'll see you later for a few pints, mate. And it's not. It's not BAFTA-winning stuff or anything.
No.
But I think it's an interesting insight into a privileged world, but I really hope it's kept as a sort of a one-off, a very rare.
I think where it
Celebrity refs to celebrity journalists.
But where it can be used is the VAR thing. I think it can be used because at the moment you have this thing where nobody knows what the hell's going on. And I think that would be of genuine use if the referee was mic'd up to just to say to the stadium, this is what we're looking at, you know, this is what we believe has happened, we're just checking it now.
Is there any reason I may not?
Is there any reason? Those sort of things. But I do get John's point. I think there are referees in football that are, you know, a little bit more high profile than the referees in rugby who are, you know, fairly... You know, they manage to handle the celebrity thing very well. You don't get wisecracks.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's
that's
calling
the problem.
them sir.
We've got a threshold.
They don't get
here,
abused, do they?
Yeah, they don't get abuse. Everyone calls them sir. So there's not really much banter going on. You just hear some very... And also, it's a much more technical game, so you hear very, very finite instructions about the setting up of the scrum and things like that are, I think, you know, of much more use than in football. So.
OK. Well, I like the idea. I'm the only one on the table who seems to. Have you got any ideas, any innovative ideas to transform our game, to take our game, to advance it? That looks like a no.
No.
Dressing rooms. I would like to get access to dressing room footage. I mean, the Premier League, I think, and the broadcasters have been trying.
Man City's documentary.
Well, yes, but you know, that was obviously quite, you know, polished, cleaned up. I think.
Yeah.
I think right from the very start of the Premier League in '92, Sky wanted cameras in dressing rooms, but every single time, you know, managers and teams have said absolutely no way. But, yeah.
The ceremonial beheading of the two people who stand next to the goal in European football, to maybe start each match with some sort of ceremony where, you know, we get rid of them and then we can just have a proper game of football and make decisions without, you know, there being this sort of bump on a log next to the goal that does nothing. Yeah, I know. It was a joke. I wasn't.
Someone somewhere will be outraged.
Anyone viewed at home, I don't actually want match officials ceremonially beheaded. I really don't. It was a joke. Yeah, exactly. I was exaggerating for comic effect.
You know what will happen on social. Now you've said it, Martin. That's it. Stevie?
No, I mean...
Let's talk Montenegro. Come on. Let's finish off with Montenegro England, shall we?
The game's just getting so technical now, isn't it? We feel as though we're having to use technology now all the time, and you just wonder how far this is going to go, and then it's going to get stripped all out again, and we go back to the way we were and loving human error, basically. OK. Montenegro England, what's going to happen? More of the same? Well, I mean, historically, England haven't done terribly well in Montenegro, have we? We've had our difficulties there. But I suspect with this team, there's no team in world football at the minute will fancy taking on England. Because, love this kind of chat. Well, I honestly don't. It's come from so far out as well. We're a year away from major tournaments.
Usually it's because we smashed the place up, whereas now it's actually
now it's the team smashing the place up, not our fans. So I think England have. There's so much confidence in that squad at the minute, and so much kind of optimism and ability, as I said before, that I don't think they would fear going anywhere, and certainly not to places like Montenegro, where in the past it may have been difficult. But you know, you look back to some England performances, and we've been very pedestrian in the past. I don't think we are now. No, looking good, particularly after Friday night's 5-0 victory over the Czech Republic. OK, we run out of time. Thanks very much to the guys. Very entertaining this morning. Thanks to Martin, to John and to Steve this morning. You can catch the show on the podcast. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, 9:30. See you then. Bye-bye.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.